Hey, it's Chuck.
And I don't think he's going to throw the ball as much as he thinks he's going to throw the ball now that Chip Kelly's on board. And I'm happy about that. More quarterback.
The truth is, Ryan Day has made a change philosophically, but it's none of those.
You all know who wins. LSU is the drunkest fan base in the country.
Hey, welcome to Chuck on Bucks. Good to see you guys all. What day is it? Is it Thursday, man? I'm screwed up on a bye week. I think it is Thursday. It is Thursday. Juckeye Studios coming to you from Akron, Ohio. Appreciate you all for joining me as always. We got some college football to talk about today for sure, but it is a bye week. We'll talk about Nebraska maybe a little bit today because I do have a couple of questions that I am, every Thursday and Friday, I have some questions for the upcoming game. Since we have no game this week, I am going to ask a couple of those questions, some things that I want to see for the Nebraska game. But we do have to talk, unfortunately, about something that's necessary to talk about, not always super entertaining, and that is some rules stuff, right? Rules not always super exciting. But we talked about Ohio State being fatigued by Oregon's tempo offense at some points during the game. There were several areas during that game where I saw Jack standing straight up, Tyleek on his knees at the time the ball was snapped. Not a good thing. And we talked about the lack of substitutions. That is something that, old habits die hard. They told us all along that they were going to be substituting more guys, more depth. And I don't think we saw as much as we would have liked when you got guys who were exhausted, but that's not what this is about. Some teams obviously counter tempo by faking injuries. Ohio State did not do that. I guess the question is, would you have wanted to see your team do that? You can do that and game the rules and get an advantage by manipulating the rules. Would it be genius? Of course, it would not be genius. Nobody applauds this kind of douchebaggery. It's been around for a long time. Lane Kiffin does it a lot. He gets blasted for it. I've blasted him for it, appropriately so, I think. But the fact that this has not been addressed at this point is absolutely ridiculous. Been in the news a lot lately, and a lot of powerful people are weighing in on it now. Reese Davis weighed in recently in a conversation that he had, and so did Nick Saban, as well as Kirk Herbstreit. And when you see this kind of momentum, it's usually a precursor to seeing something change, which is exciting. I would like to see this change a lot. Reese Davis's solution for the change in this is coaches preach accountability. They should just stop doing it. Now, he's very mad and very adamant about this. Stop gaming the rules for your benefit. And gaming the rules for your benefit, normally seen as a cowardly act. Certainly flopping and faking injuries is cowardly. Unfortunately, Reese Davis's solution to me is not really a solution at all. Nobody's going to stop flopping or faking injuries because they preach accountability. These coaches are trying to get and hold on to jobs that pay an inordinate amount of money, and they're going to do whatever they can to win and hold on to those jobs. Unless they're really stand-up ethical folks, then they won't do that. Ohio State didn't do that. Anyway, the boss certainly wants something done. The boss, of course, Nick Saban, obviously a longtime hater of tempo football. We all remember his speech, "Is this what we want college football to be?" Which was just tremendous at the time, seeing Nick Saban he was just so exasperated at that point. Like, he hated it. He hates tempo football. He thinks it's not real football. But when you're using the rules to slow down the game, it's just cheesy, man. I don't like it at all. Nick weighed in and said in the old days, you had to run off the field when you got injured. I broke my leg. I had to run off the field. Directives come from coaches to stay down if you're injured now because they don't have time to rush a substitute in. And until there's a penalty for doing it, I know it's a sensitive subject for an official to make a judgment, but there should be a flop rule. And if a guy actually gets up and runs down and right before the play, he flops, maybe they should be charged a timeout because it's pretty obvious in these situations that they're not injured. And of course, it's incredibly obvious. We all see it. We know what it is. And they should get a timeout charged to them because they get a timeout. Now, Reese Davis counters this and several other people. I'm just using Reese as an example. What if a player actually has a seizure or an asthma attack, a real life situation? I think that's pretty easily correctable, don't you? If you see a kid not getting back up after flopping because he's having an actual medical emergency, well, then we're going to go ahead and pick up that flag, right? You could say they could continue to do this or keep getting away with this by faking those kind of long-term injuries. I suppose, man, I suppose you could. Are they really going to take it that far? Because then you can't come back in the game, right? If you have a real asthma attack or a seizure, you're not going to be allowed to come back in. I think that this is such an easy situation when a referee sees a guy clearly doing this and faking an injury. Like, what are we doing here? I know that we want to have as few judgment calls as we can in the game because people see things differently. And we hear this often. We don't want these judgment calls. They want to make things as black and white as they can. And every time I hear that, like steam comes out of my ears because we are foregoing common sense at the expense of not wanting judgment calls. And nobody ever brings up that literally every single penalty is a judgment call, every single one. What one ref calls holding, another one will not. What one calls pass interference, another one will not. By the letter of the rule, you could probably call holding on every single play at every level of football. Does it get called? Of course not. Every call is a judgment call. And to pretend like referees should not be calling penalties when these guys are obviously faking injuries is absurd. Herb Street weighs in. He says it's unethical. Unethical to game the rules for an advantage in a football game. And there's a whole lot of people agreeing with him, but I really find it odd how these people are distinguishing, calling Dan Lanning a genius for pulling the move that he did, which gained an advantage for his defense, and at the same time, call flopping unethical. Lane Kiffin feels the same way. He pointed that out too. Obviously, Lane Kiffin got a lot of crap for his flopping earlier in the season. I just don't really see how you parse the logic. To me, there's no difference in those scenarios. One coach faking injuries, the other faking a mistake, both gaming the system for their team's advantage in the football game. But there's some positive momentum to address the flopping issues, and that's a good thing. A couple more issues I would like to see addressed. How obnoxious is it when you see something in a football game that is wrong and you immediately hear the announcer say, that's not reviewable? Every aspect of the football game should be reviewable. Again, common sense. If we see something is wrong and we have the technology and brains to correct it in 10 seconds, we should be doing that, right? Like, what's the argument against that? I'll never understand some of this stuff. And while we're on the rules of football, I would certainly love for targeting to have some discretion. Dylan and I talked about this before. He disagrees with me somehow. I don't know how anybody could disagree with me on this, but he does. I get that you want to get this out of the game. There are some targeting calls that are just so obviously like their helmets just happen to click at the very end of a tackle, and by the letter of the law, it might fit a targeting. And there are some that are nasty and vicious. Now, you already review every targeting call. Why can't you give a smaller penalty to the ones that just barely fit the criteria, but are technically by the letter of the law targeting? And people will say, I don't want somebody making that judgment, right? Well, let's say you give that judgment to the people in the booth, and let's say they get it wrong even 50% of the time. Even if they get it wrong 50% of the time, the result is still going to be fewer, hugely consequential targeting penalties and ejections because the penalty for them is enormous. And if you want to get it out of the game, you give an enormous penalty. But if you want that, then you shouldn't be calling it as much as you are. And if you are, you should have a milder penalty for a milder version of targeting. Anyway, as far as Lanning's rule is concerned, we talked yesterday about the budding rivalry. Another chapter, I'm like, this is crazy, right? The move he pulled, obviously, you've all heard by now, has sparked a rule change. This is so odd for a rule to change during the season. Dan Lanning obviously admitted to doing it on purpose, essentially. And I had a Duck fan saying in the comments that he loves my hatred for Dan Lanning, gets excited watching it come out of me. Listen, if you're anybody who's been here, listen to me for any length of time, particularly Buckeye fans, right? Like, many people have gotten angry with me over the way I have glowingly spoken about Dan Lanning over the course of the time I started this show in February. Like, my opinion of Dan Lanning, the head coach, is incredibly high. If I had one choice in this current landscape for someone to come and build a program from scratch, I would choose him number one. I've said a lot of good things. I made a video and called him the scariest man in college football. This has nothing to do with my opinion of Dan Lanning, the coach. I'm talking about the move he pulled at the end of that game. Now, genius? Absolutely not. It's been done before. It was a slick application of the rules at a slick time. Really excellent to be situationally prepared for that. I still think it was unethical in Bush League. But how did we get to this? How was a coach able to manipulate the rules like this? Well, a rule change made it possible. In 2020, you could not have done this before 2020. But they changed the rules in 2020 to make this a live ball foul. Just 4 years ago, he couldn't have done this. They changed it to allow somebody to get away with this because officials were having a hard time with all the offensive players and defensive players. You know, offensive players change, defensive players are allowed to make their substitutions. And they were having a difficult time. So they just decided we're going to let the play roll and then we'll address it basically after the play. All right. So Lanning pulls this rule. How are they going to address it so it doesn't happen again? We know that rule changes very, very rarely happen during the season. So they've made effective immediately a new interpretation of the current rule just 4 days after the game. And the new interpretation is after a 2-minute timeout in either half, if the defense commits a substitution foul of 12 or more players on the field and they participate in the down, officials will penalize the defense for the foul and give the option to the offended team to reset the clock back to the time displayed before the snap. So you no longer can do it again. And Dan Lanning has now got a rule named after him for the stunt that he pulled against Ohio State and Ryan Day in their very first meeting. Now, if you're Ryan Day, man, this has got to sting, buddy. It's got to sting so bad. We talked yesterday about all the criteria that you would need to make to have a rivalry in this day and age. It's very hard to start a rivalry. You can't, it has to happen on its own. You can't make it happen. Nobody tried to make this one happen. But coming out of that game, like, this is being viewed nationally as Dan Lanning owned Ryan Day. I mean, that is just one more check to the spice of this one, man. Obviously, I don't think he owned Ryan Day myself. It was flawlessly executed, and certainly you got to give him props if you're someone who is a fan of situational awareness and practicing situations. I think it was pretty slick. It was a slick application. At the same time, I'm a right is right and wrong is wrong guy. Just like I said, Ohio State, I would not want them faking injuries to counter tempo. I wouldn't want my coach doing what he did, but situationally prepared, he certainly was. I don't feel like it was cheating, but I feel like it was unethical. And he now has a rule named after him, just like Connor Stalions. Congratulations, Dan, you're in good company. But an incredible amount of spice to add on to this budding new Big Ten opponent. And I did not go to the game at Autzen Stadium. Should we be fortunate enough to meet again in Indianapolis, 100%, man. I'm there. All the Juck Guy crew. It's going to be great. That is going to be one heck of a place. And if you've never been to Indy to watch a game, also a really cool place to watch a game, for sure. Good morning to all our friends in the chat. How we doing today, guys? Nice to see y'all. Look at this. All our friends. What's up, Dago, Alex? What's up, Steve? The Bluegrass Buckeye? Emily, how we all doing? You guys are idiots, man. OSU fan crying about something. Like, I don't know how could you perceive any of that as crying? I literally said it was a really like he was prepared and he executed it flawlessly and it was slick. The rule literally got changed, right? Did the rule get changed? Yes. They changed a rule 4 days after the game. So if anybody was to cry about it, they would be within their right, in my opinion. They changed a rule over it. Just moronic. So moronic. All right, on to Cincinnati. This might so Bill Belichick, Nick Saban, Kirk Ferentz, all coach for the Browns together. I used to hate Nick Saban so much. I used to hate him. I used to hate Bill Belichick. I really came around the older I got, and I just love listening to those guys. But listening to Nick Saban just talk about that rule, I just love it. He's so great for the sport. I love the like him and his dynamic with Pat McAfee, who I can't stand. Really interesting to watch. Anyway, another crusty old coach. Well, not quite as old, but becoming pretty old is Kyle Whittingham at Utah. Another coach I really respect and like. And Utah came into the season favored big time to win the Big 12. Much of that was quarterback Cam Rising was going to be back. Obviously, he was out all last season. They told us every week he was going to play, it seemed like, but he never ended up playing. Well, he is now out officially for this season, and he's trying to get an 8th year of eligibility. Now, I think the dude is a shell of his former self. He used to be a really good quarterback. I don't even think Kyle Whittingham is going to want him back at Utah, to be honest. I feel like that program's been kind of held in purgatory with Cam for 2 years now. And Utah, I don't think they're going to end up being able to pull out of this and win the Big 12 because it's a very highly competitive league. They've already lost a couple. Just one of the weirder situations we've seen in a while. I got to say, though, these quarterbacks that are hitting 26 and 27 years old and Cam trying for an 8th year of eligibility, I almost lose a little respect for them. Like, you're playing a sport with 18-year-olds and you're 26 and 27-year-old journeyman quarterbacks. Like 8 years of eligibility, man. What happened to this sport? I don't even think eligibility is real anymore. I follow this stuff pretty closely, particularly like recruiting. And if you were to talk to me about an Ohio State player, I could probably tell you the class he came in with, a couple of guys he came in with, what his rankings were, multiple services. And if you ask me how many years of eligibility he had left, I probably would choose not to answer because I would not be sure. You can play half a season now and still redshirt. Like, eligibility is not even real. So Nebraska coming up, like I said, usually Friday before the game, we go over a couple questions for the following game. And without a game this week, I still think that there are a couple questions that I just want to address because there are a few things on the top of my mind from that game. Nebraska's going to come in as a 23-point favorite. Or I'm sorry, 23-point dog. And there are some Buckeye fans irritated that nobody's been talking about Nebraska. It's all been about Penn State because that Penn State game certainly looms large. Nebraska will be no pushover for sure. They are actually dogs this week in Indiana. Indiana, 6.5-point favorite over Nebraska. Nebraska currently just one loss to Illinois, a ranked Illinois. And that showdown against Indiana is going to be the difference between whether they come into Columbus at 6-1 or 5-2. If they come in at 5-2, both losses will be to ranked opponents. So they've been playing really solid. Ohio State will play Indiana later, and I think Indiana is probably the story of the college football season so far. Can you imagine this? Indiana, at the beginning of the year, if somebody told you would be favored by a touchdown in week 8 hosting Nebraska. I mean, that's wild. But that Nebraska game we were hoping was going to be a night game. It was going to be a big recruiting weekend. Well, the time's been announced. It's going to be at noon. And obviously you want those big recruiting weekends to be at night so that the out-of-state guys can come and travel the same day. That won't be happening. But we do have a list of official visitors. I'm just going to go over the guys in 25 and 26 because 27 is just, nobody knows them yet. Anthony Rogers, Turbo Rogers, Alabama commit. He's coming up. That's going to be an official. Damola Ajiduhan, and that is the offensive lineman that Fry is trying to flip from Georgia Tech, as is Georgia. That's a big one. He's coming in. I have heard that the money that it's going to require to bring him in is higher than Ohio State wants to go for him. 2025 defensive end Zahir Mathis. Obviously, he's a part of the class, and he's been to Penn State several times, more than he's been to Ohio State. This is going to be his official visit. This one's going to be huge to keep him in the class. 2026 running back Jamichael Jones. 2026 tight end Corbin Foreman. 2026 tight end Lincoln Keys. And 2026 linebacker Storm Miller. So, question number one, what are we most looking forward to see? For me, it's obviously pressure. We've discussed it all week. And I've seen this week some people referencing the PFF numbers for pressure. Technically, PFF said that Ohio State pressured Dillon Gabriel on almost 40% of his dropbacks. Now, I don't know exactly what their criteria is for pressure, but it's clearly different from all of ours. That's quite obvious. My usual stance with PFF is it's a tool, not a stat. Those are individuals grading those plays, and it can help, particularly when you're comparing one player versus the next. It can help. But in this instance, we just clearly have different definitions. Our definition of pressure is just a little bit of a higher standard than theirs, I guess, right? Their definition is technical, and I suppose it's got to be because you got to market a win or a loss. But it's very obvious that the pressure wasn't good enough. And it has been like, I'm just really interested in how Ohio State is going to address this, right? Because like you, I listen to a whole lot of opinions around Ohio State media and fans, social media. It's very rare when you see everybody kind of on the same page, particularly after a loss. But Ohio State's defensive line, defense in general, not getting enough pressure is something that I have seen Ohio State happy fans who, like, there's three categories, right? You got the happy fans who nothing's ever wrong. You got the grumpy fans. They'll always find something bad that they want to talk about. And then you got the ones that point out the good and celebrate the good and also address the bad. I try to be that guy, try to be. Sometimes I'm more one or the other, but I try to be. But everybody's on the same page here. And that is, you've got Jack and JT and Tyleek and Ty and the guys coming off the bench, Caden Curry and Mitchell Melton. There's no excuse for not being able to pressure. No excuse. You got Caleb Downs, you can blitz. Like, you got all these tools at your disposal. So if we got everybody on the same page, we know that they're saying it inside the Woody as well. So what are we going to see different? Against Nebraska, are we going to see something new? We know that the LJ and Jim Knowles rift come to a head. We've heard it talked about everywhere now, like it's all over the place. And I've never seen so many people talking about that. I think that's always a good thing. I believe it's been addressed. I believe it's been addressed in a way that we would have wanted it to be addressed from the very beginning. Better late than never. And we're going to know if it's been addressed come Penn State. I don't know if we're going to find out during Nebraska, because if you are beating Nebraska soundly, you're not going to throw out a bunch of new looks when you can introduce some new looks at Penn State. But if we go to Penn State and we start seeing some more stunts, maybe we see some 3-down lineman pressures, then we know that the problems have not only been addressed, but they are. Jim Knowles is using everything he can to play his full defense. In his full defense, I was watching Oklahoma State last night when he was there. The defense looks totally different, but it obviously is going to look totally different. He's made a lot of changes to it, and he's talked about a lot of the changes that he's made to it, because at Oklahoma State, there was a learning curve when he came to Ohio State to realize, okay, I don't need to coach my way out of talent mismatches. When you're Oklahoma State and you're playing Oklahoma and Texas, you're at a talent disadvantage, and he had to coach his way out of that at times. And that's how his defense was designed. When he got to Ohio State, he had to nix a lot of that stuff out, because he's no longer doing that against anybody, coaching from a talent disadvantage. So it's going to look different when you watch his Oklahoma State film, but it looks like a totally different defense. I was actually reading something yesterday. So this was an article, and somebody had submitted the question to the writer, basically asking about the Larry and Jim Knowles rift. And the question was, is it real? Is it a big deal? And the answer was, they obviously have two different philosophies. Larry Johnson wants 4 down linemen. Jim Knowles prefers 3 in the jack position. But Ohio State doesn't really have anybody that could fit the jack position. And like, my jaw just dropped, dude. My jaw just dropped. That's just that's state media right there, man. That is state media right there. Second question, left tackle, man. I think that a lot of people are maybe playing this down because Zen Mihalski didn't get run through by some pass rushes. Just as big of an issue here is that running on the left side of that line was absolute money for this team. Absolute money. Donovan and Josh Simmons were blowing open lanes that you and I could have run through. And that is going to hurt so bad to not have that to count on. Ideally, plugging in a left tackle like Zen Mihalski, if he's playing at a high level, would be your best bet because you don't have to move anything around. You don't have to change any chemistry. So I think they're going to try that first, and they're going to try that in this week off. They're probably going to try that against Nebraska. If it doesn't go good, then you got to get your best 5 out. Who's your best 5? Well, Seth McLaughlin at center, Donovan Jackson at left guard, Tegra at right guard, Josh Fryer at right tackle. Austin Saraveld is your number 5. Would they potentially put Austin Saraveld at tackle? Well, he's played tackle, played it when they were sick. When all the sicknesses, he was with the ones. He did fairly well. Listened to him talk maybe 3 weeks after that, and they asked him about it, about left tackle. The answer that I heard from him didn't sound like there was a tremendous amount of confidence, but yes, he said he would if he needed to. I don't know where they go, man. I don't know where they go. Part of me wants to see the best 5 out there. Obviously, you want to give Zen Mihalski the opportunity to win it first. I just don't know, man. I just don't know if he's got what it takes. I sure hope he does. But one thing is for sure, it doesn't matter what they do. They have lost a ton from the running game because of this. Even if they can do decent with pass protection and people talking about scheming around the issues with Chip. Yeah, you can do that. You used to be able to count on it to run the ball, right? And now you're talking about scheming around it. That's a big blow to the offense, and it can't really be understated. All right, number 3, Will Kazmarek. Obviously, it seems like he broke his arm or certainly hyperextended in a way that he's out for a long time. We know that. He was playing a ton of snaps at tight end. Jelani went from 20 snaps-ish in the first 3 games to about 5 Michigan State, 5 Iowa, and similar Oregon. He's played his way out of the lineup. And reading the tea leaves, I don't think this is a coaching issue. And I'm quick to point out when I think it's a coaching issue when it comes to playing time. I'm also quick to point out, jury's out on Keenan Bailey as a tight end coach, for sure. Jury's out. But I don't get the feeling that this is a coaching decision based on something that any of us wouldn't do. I feel like this is Jelani doing whatever it was he was doing to get called out by Ryan Day early on in the preseason for not focusing and things of that nature. I just don't, because he was playing good. If you're playing pretty good and you're built like Jelani, and they definitely want to be able to use a guy like Jelani, and then you just lose your playing time almost totally, well, it seems to me like something's on the player. So what are we going to see? Well, Bennett Christian, obviously a pretty good blocker, doesn't add much in the passing game, but I certainly would like to have a pretty good blocker over anything else from the tight end position in this offense anyway. So we'll see a lot of him, probably some Patrick Gerd. I love Gerd, man. Patrick Gerd, a former walk-on whose dad was a Buckeye, and I think he's earned himself a scholarship. But unlike most schools who do these really fun videos where the coach surprises the walk-on who's earned the scholarship, right? Everybody gets that feel-good moment. We don't get those at Ohio State. In fact, they don't even announce when a walk-on has earned a scholarship. They won't even confirm or deny it if you ask them, which I will never understand. Like, those are awesome stories. Those are good things. Feel good things. Why are we not celebrating that? I don't get it. Don't get it at all. We got some big games this weekend, and we'll go over those this week. But last week, what's up, RDB? Dustin says, if the Bucks lose to Penn State, what will you and react respectively? What will you and react respectively? I don't know. I was excited for that question, but I can't understand it. Woody's does not hate the idea of moving Donovan Jackson over to left tackle and having Austin be the left guard. For the running game, I think that would work pretty well. That would probably work pretty well. Anthony says, definitely don't drop 4 linemen and only send 2 linebackers. And we talked about that play yesterday. They call that Miami cover 0, and it can work effectively. It can. I saw some clips of it working really well for Clemson. Woody says, I really think whenever Ohio State faces a mobile quarterback, they always use a cage rush, use the first 2 seconds to set up the cage, and then start to try to win the rep. It's a Knowles thing, I believe. What's up, Billy? How we doing, buddy? So ratings came out for last week, and what were you thinking? Oregon, Ohio State, was it going to beat Alabama and Georgia? It was close, guys. At the peak, the most viewers, you had Ohio State and Oregon peaking at 13.4 million. Bama and Georgia peaked at 14.1 million. That close. But the average, Bucks, Ducks were a little down. The average was 10.4 for Ohio State and Oregon and 12 for Bama and Georgia. So Bama and Georgia averaged more, but the peak viewership just a little bit more. Ohio State was on NBC. Bama, Georgia was on, I think, CBS. I think so. I'm going to go ahead and blame that. Did anybody else? I don't know if this is an age thing, an eyes thing, but the shadows on the field in Oregon wearing the black uniforms, I had a hard time seeing as good as I would have liked to in the first half. Is that a me thing? Did anybody else have an issue with that? The way the shadows were, the angle of the sun, and Oregon wearing the black jerseys, which they should not have been wearing. That was an abomination. Oregon should have been wearing green in this first of many matchups. You should be wearing your traditional colors. That was a big fail. I hated it. By the way, they called for the stands to be wearing a blackout. And Oregon, I don't think you guys cooperated very well. There was a ton of green in the stands. You were supposed to be wearing black. That was orders from headquarters. You didn't follow orders. Doesn't surprise me out there. Really doesn't. Anyway, second best game of the week in the 3:30 time slot. Red River, Oklahoma, Texas was on ABC. That was a 3:30 game, obviously, and that was 7.6 million viewers. The highest rated noon game was Alabama barely escaping from South Kakalaki. 6 million people watched that game. I'd like to see what that peaked at. Don't have that figure, but that probably peaked really high at the end of that game. Number 4, Penn State at USC. And this one, ouch, man. 4.3 viewers. Compare that to Red River, which got 7.6 million. And Red River was boring as hell. I don't know how people weren't watching Penn State USC over that. Number 5, Ole Miss at LSU. That game was obviously opposite. Ducks Bucks, 4.2 million people. That was on ABC. Kansas State, Colorado. That was the late game. That got 3.3 million. Kansas State ended up winning that game by 3. It was exciting. Most of you probably fell asleep before the end of it. I unfortunately was up and watched it. Number 7, Florida at Tennessee. Billy Napier absolutely screwed the pooch here. 3.2 million viewers. And when you combine the two SEC games, Florida State, Tennessee, and Ole Miss, LSU, that's 7.4 million for those two combined versus Ohio State, Oregon, which was 10.2 million. So there you go. Big Ten beats the SEC. Number 8, Washington at Iowa. And that was a blowout. 2.4 million for that game. And that'll wrap it up. I wanted to go over some odds today. So Heisman odds, conference odds, national championship odds, updated. Ashton Genty is now number 1 in the Heisman odds. A group of 5 kid winning the Heisman would be so cool for college football. Dylan Gabriel has propelled himself up into number 2 after that virtuoso performance. Travis Hunter now number 3, a little bit of a ways back. Cam Ward kind of with him. And then after that, you got the 3 quarterbacks that everybody thought would be there at the top in Milroe, Ewers, and Beck. I'm excited to talk about this Texas-Georgia game tomorrow, because talk about Carson Beck, I feel, is just such an overrated prospect, and I cannot wait. I cannot wait for Texas to eat Georgia tomorrow, which I think is going to happen. And if we talk about the national championship odds, you've got Texas at number 1 at plus 350. Ohio State number 2, is that 350? That's 390. Ohio State just 50 back at plus 440. Ohio State's still the second best odds to win the national championship. Georgia 3, Oregon 4. Then you got a pretty big drop down to Alabama, Penn State, Clemson, Miami, Tennessee. Look at Texas A&M is above LSU and Ole Miss. How about the job Mike Elko's doing? I'm very impressed with Mike Elko, man. You know, there's an argument out there, and I'm not in favor of firing Ryan Day, but the argument goes, who you going to get? And it's the first thing you hear everybody say. I think I saw Cardell saying it yesterday. It's the dumbest argument there is, guys. It really is. Who you going to get? Well, let's look at a guy like, who do they call the best coaches in the, we see these lists every offseason. The best coaches in college football. Take a look at the top of those lists. Lance Leopold from Kansas. Well, he was coaching at Buffalo before Kansas hired him. Kalen DeBoer. The dude was coaching at Fresno State, and before that in the NAIA and the FCS. Dan Lanning, the defensive coordinator at Georgia. Jed Fish, doing a tremendous job up at Washington. He was at Arizona from the NFL, a retread. Like, the who you going to get argument is just so weird to me. Did anybody think any of those guys were going to come into college football and just be excellent coaches? No. So the answer is, you probably don't know who you're going to get. Did you know who they were going to get at Ohio State after John Cooper? No. He was a dude coaching over at Youngstown State. That's up for the people to make the hire and make a good hire to decide who you're going to get. The wrong way to look at it is, let me pick these 3 best coaches and say, well, could we get him? Could we get him to leave here? Like, that's not the way this is done. Obviously, you might take a big swing like that right off the rip. But the who you're going to get argument is one to use to paralyze people into saying you can't make change. You can't make change because who you're going to get. It's a bad argument. It's a bad argument. And another bad argument is you're going to lose the entire team. You're going to lose the entire recruiting class. And this is more of a new one because now players are allowed to transfer when the coach leaves. Well, we got a couple examples of this. Number one, why don't we look at Michigan State? Jonathan Smith comes in. They lost like 40 players. Guess what? Michigan State is better because they got a better coach. And they got a better recruiting class. Or we could look on a bigger scale, a team that is a parallel with Ohio State. Alabama, in Kalen DeBoer's year 1, just took over the number 1 class from Ohio State. I think they've done just fine at Alabama. They also, by the way, still have the number one talent composite in the country. So, nope, they lost a lot of players. Program's still in excellent standing and the number one class at On3. So, the who you going to get or you're going to lose everybody argument are paralyzing arguments. They're garbage arguments. And again, I'm not an advocate for firing Ryan Day at all. I'm just saying, like, using arguments like that to shut people down, I don't like that. Everybody has an opinion. And if they come to their opinion honestly and logically, I respect it. And I don't like arguments that are used to shut people down. So those are bunk arguments, bad arguments. I could go on and on about the who you're going to get one. Like I could take that for 10 minutes. It's a horrible argument. Anyway, when we talk about the class of 2025, Alabama, you see, just did take over the number one spot at On3. The Buckeyes still have that at 247, barely. 247 just came out with new rankings. And it almost feels as though, this is going to sound ridiculous, right? It almost feels as though there was a coordinated attack against Ohio State players. We saw the Ohio State class drop. It dropped from like 312 to 308. And we saw a whole lot of guys in the Buckeyes class drop. Now, it would make sense to me and to you probably if you've got, let's say, 20 kids that, yeah, maybe 10 go up, 10 go down, or things don't always add up, right? Maybe 13 go up and 7 go down, or vice versa. But what if I was to tell you out of the 26 guys in the Ohio State class, 4 of them went up and the rest all dropped or stayed the same? Like, would that not feel like you to be a coordinated attack? I don't know. Anyway, last night I was furious. So bear with the tone if I'm a little irritated. But I just recorded this last night of myself kind of going through the class and going through the guys. So a little recap, a little clip here of me going through the class last night. I'll be right back after this. 4-7 rankings in the Buckeyes still sit at number one, but they were at 312, now down to 308. That's a big drop. Let's see what happened. And again, these are the 247 internal rankings, not the composite. We'll hit that next. We had 11 top 100 players. Let's see here. We got Tavian St. Clair, Devin Sanchez, Naeem Offord, all still at 5 stars. Carter Lowe still sitting at 34, just outside of 5-star territory. Here's where it gets a little dicey. Fahim Delane, Riley Pettijohn, Quincy Porter, and Ziggy Grady, all down into the 90s. That's a drop for every single one of them, if I remember it correctly. Bo Jackson was in the top 100, as was Zahir Mathis. Nate Roberts was roughly 120. He's now 211. BP Miller, here's the good news of the day. BP moves up, 4-star status, now listed as a wide receiver instead of a quarterback. So props to him for getting his run. That's really awesome. This is absurd. TJ Alford, 227 in the country, the number 23 linebacker. Show me those 22. That's ridiculous. Max Roy doesn't surprise me. London Merritt, this does. London generally has been considered about a top 150 player in the country. Unranked. Des Jones, unranked. Phil Bell. This, I'll come back to that in a second. Brody Lennon, again, doesn't surprise me. Trajan Odom, he's been a 3-star in their ranking forever. I don't get it. It's not true. When you look at this, guys, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 3-stars. Now, Isaiah West. Isaiah West, they've got as the number 21 back in the country. I know for a fact, because I took a screenshot last month, Isaiah West was the number 12 running back in the country because Jordan Davison was 13, which is why I took the screenshot. Isaiah had moved above him. Now, down to 21 in the country. I've seen some of his games. I've seen some of his film this year. He looks fantastic. So let's go to the composite. We've got our big dogs at the top with Devin, Tavian, and Naeem. Riley Pettijohn, number 36. Fahim, number 42. Quincy, number 53. This is more like it. Carter, 54. Zahir, 65. Bo, still in the top 195. TJ, there we go. Top 100 player. Top 10 linebacker. Ziggy Grady, 105. London Merritt, back up to the top 50. Nate, top 50. Phil Bell, top 200. Jarquez, where he belongs, 4-star, 285. These dudes, all top 300. All of these guys, top 300. Brody, Max, Deshaun. Des Jones, just barely outside of it. How many 3-stars? 3. 3 in the composite, which factors in the other 3 rankings. 9 in the 247 and Turtle rankings. It would make sense that some guys would go up and some guys would go down at a relatively even number, right? If you got 26 guys, 13 up, 13 down, or maybe it's 10 up, 16 down, or vice versa. Tell me in what world how it makes sense that 80% of all the guys in the class on 247 went down. How does that make any sense at all? It doesn't. It's ridiculous. But let's look at this class with the symmetry, which I just absolutely love when we look at this class. First off, all great dudes. There's a ton of potential here. Tavian at quarterback, Bo Jackson and Isaiah West, and I think Isaiah West is one of the absolute steals of this class. Totally underappreciated and underranked. He's phenomenal. As much as I love Bo, and I do, I think Isaiah West will be the more productive running back at Ohio State. At wide receiver, you went with more of a, I hate to use the term budget, but the truth is there are 2 position groups here where you didn't really spend a lot of money in this cycle, and you got to kind of think about things like that. Next year, Chris Henry Jr. Last year, Jeremiah Smith. This year, you didn't go heavy for the headliner wide receiver that was going to cost you a lot of money. You went with these 4 guys, and being able to pull these 4 guys without going and spending heavy, an unbelievable class. I love the potential. Quincy Porter, now this is a headliner dude. He really is. Bully ball guy, big size guy. I love this dude on the team. Des Jones, this is your slot guy, your quick guy, great hands, great routes. BP Miller, your freak athlete you're going to work with, turn him into a great wide receiver. And Phillip Bell, who at one point was thought to be a 5-star wide receiver when he was a little younger, just didn't quite grow into what they thought he would, but a really talented kid. At offensive line, Justin Fry puts together 3 really good-looking prospects that I like. Carter Lowe out of Toledo, absolute beast of an offensive lineman. Everybody wanted this kid. You got him. Props to you. Jake Cook, this is the kid, local kid from outside Columbus. He is really good. He's going to be a center, getting better every week. His body looks great. Really had to work for his offer. The story of the cycle, really, for me, was Jake Cook. And Javon McFadden, you fought with him, down to the end with Colorado and Maryland, and you end up getting him, and I think he's a solid-looking prospect as well. At tight end, Keenan Bailey killed it. Nate Roberts, the kid lives 15 minutes from Norman, Oklahoma. His brother goes to Oklahoma. Keenan got him. Brody Lennon was a total sleeper. Wonderful evaluation. Shortly after they got his commitment, he actually moved in On3's rankings above Nate Roberts. The kid's film is ridiculous. It's lower competition, so you really got to sift through. But man, an electric athlete. The dude's awesome. At corner, what can you say, man? You got the number 1 and number 2 guys currently in the class. Devin Sanchez, we know for sure isn't going anywhere. We'll see what happens with Naeem at safety. Fahim Delane is your headliner. Does not get enough pub. The kid is an absolute thumper and an incredible athlete. Cody Haddad, a really interesting prospect out of St. Ignatius. Dad and grandpa played in the NFL, and he's certainly got the athleticism that his dad does. Deshaun Stewart, total stud, very underrated. Des Jones' teammate out of DePaul in New Jersey. Those New Jersey dudes are absolute dogs. These 2, no different. At defensive tackle, you got Trajan Odom out of North Carolina, Maxwell Roy, who is Isaiah West's teammate at Philadelphia St. Joe's, but also a Jersey kid, as is Isaiah. Those are all Jersey kids. Quincy Porter, Isaiah West, Trajan Odom, Maxwell Roy, Des Jones, and Deshaun Stewart. 5 dudes from New Jersey in this class. And then you got Jarquez Carter. Jarquez Carter is like a little Warren Sapp. The kid's a beast, and he's strong as an ox. He's quick. He's twitchy. He does more 225 reps than all but one of the current Ohio State players, and he's 18 years old. So incredibly strong. He's just a little shorter. And, yeah, I'll take it, man. That's an absolute – I don't want to use the term budget, but like the wide receivers on the defensive line, they went with guys that they could get in without having to do max deals, because you gotta choose where you spend now, right? Uh, I think they did excellent evaluations. Love all those defensive tackles. At defensive end, this is where opinions differ. London Merritt, you don't know if he's going to be a defensive end or a defensive tackle. Ziggy Grady, Zahir Mathis, some people find Zahir Mathis to be not very good, too skinny, and maybe a flip target for Penn State. Well, he is a flip target for Penn State, but maybe he will flip to Penn State. Some think that he is exactly what you need: tall, slender, going to be an excellent edge rusher. I don't know, man. Until I see the kid put on some weight, I have no idea. Some guys are hard gainers and can't put on a lot of weight. He needs a lot. Ziggy Grady, I think, might be a step slow than other people think. I would have preferred Damian Shanklin out of Indianapolis, but I think he's a hell of a prospect anyway. So as we project forward, I just, the next crop of defensive ends, I'm not thrilled about. If there was one spot on this this class that I'm not 100% like excited about, that's the one I'm reserving judgment on. Not to say that they won't be excellent; they very well could be. At linebacker, T.J. Alford, Riley Pettijohn, two super studs, and Eli Lee, who plays a little bit of a different game than those two. Some people compare it to Tommy Eichenberg. I compare it to Tommy Eichenberg, but a way better athlete. So that's the class of 2025. They really wanted the number one class. I really wanted them to get the number one class. Doesn't look like that's going to happen. Doesn't matter. Excellent group. The staff did a wonderful job with this class. So there we go. That's the class. And like, I was a little irritated, right? But I know it doesn't matter. I know it doesn't matter, but it sure would be nice to capitalize on the number one class. Just one time, it looked like we really had that opportunity at one point during the class, and it wasn't going to happen anyway. We needed a few other balls to bounce our way throughout throughout the cycle. And now the key is just holding on to everybody. Zahir Mathis obviously coming in for his official visit. That's a big one. Naeem Offord looms really large. He just put out a really positive sounding tweet last night. But at this point, like, whatever words coming out of Naeem Offord's camp or Naeem mean absolutely nothing to me. We'll see what happens on signing day. That's where I'm at with that one. Not even going to make any more predictions. Let's go through a couple of your comments. And by the way, guys, I want to say, like, my dudes over at Menace, like, they let stuff go down in the chat. Like, I don't. You know what I mean? Like, you're not going to come here and troll me and troll Ohio State fans. Like, that's not how we do it here. If you want to come in and be respectful, you're welcome. You know what I mean? If not, kick rocks. I don't do this for a living. I do this for fun, and I don't find that fun. Alex says, am I the only one who gets Tressel vibes from Ryan Day? He wins the games he's supposed to, but when it comes to the bigger game, he does not do so well. I've got more reverence for Jim Tressel than almost anybody but my grandfather. So, no, I don't really get those kind of vibes myself. But I guess I see where you're coming from a little bit. Ben still wonders how Carson Beck pulled one of the Cavender twins. So Carson Beck's girlfriend is one of the Cavender twins. They play basketball at Miami. They look really good, all done up in their makeup. But I did see a video from one of them who was defending Carson Beck after the loss to Alabama because people were calling him Timmy. They call him Timmy from South Park. He's a funky looking dude, right? He's a little bit funky looking. Anyway, she was not all done up like she is on her Instagram pictures. And to be quite honest, pretty mid in my opinion. So he's got a Lamborghini. That's all I can say. Alex asked, did anyone see Travis Hunter's stupid comment about how he should win the Heisman because you haven't seen anyone play both sides? He's a clown like everybody else on that bum team. Honestly, I am amazed at what he's able to do. I think he's an unbelievable athlete. And if Genty breaks Barry's record, for me, like, it's a slam dunk. I also think what Hunter does is amazing. And I am a definite hater of what's going on in Colorado because I hate the fake fans coming into the sport. But I'm pretty amazed myself by Genty or by Hunter. I think he's an incredible talent. RDB, what are your thoughts on the Big Ten SEC marriage coming? I absolutely love it. Like, I'm a proponent of playing more big time out of conference games. I think we all benefit as fans from it. And if you can make everybody do it, like, or you got to do it, that's perfect. Now, Ohio State has obviously already done this by scheduling Texas home and home, Alabama home and home, and Georgia home and home in the next 6 years. You literally can't look through college football and say, all right, pick 3 teams outside of the Big Ten that you would like to see Ohio State play. The 3 best. There you go. It's Texas, it's Alabama, and it's Georgia. And Ohio State did it. So that's why I'm annoyed by anybody talking about Ohio State's schedule this one particular year, which was literally the only year you could point to in the last 20 where it's been 3 garbage opponents. There's always one big dog in there, or one team you thought was going to be a big dog 7 years prior when you made the schedule. Bucks Forever did not like the all whites, and I find you to be in the extreme minority here. I think that, I talked about that quite a bit last week. I did not see really hardly any people that did not love the look of the all whites. Billy McBride loved the Oregon black uniforms. It wasn't the uniform itself that I didn't like, but I wanted to see Oregon wearing green. I wanted to see Ohio State wearing their uniforms, but I was for Ohio State wearing the whites when Oregon decided to wear the blacks, if that makes any sense at all. NBC is trash, says Big Tone. I agree. So regarding the uniforms, like, I never liked deviating from the traditional uniform. But now that they have the same templates, right? So the black jersey, the gray jersey, the white jersey, the red jersey, it's all the same template. And the same with the different colored pants. I would not mind at all if they did like the Browns do with the same scheme, the orange pants, the orange jersey, whatever. They just interchange those. Like, I wouldn't mind that one bit. But if you could just give me one pick to do just do one thing, give me back the damn gray sleeves and you can do whatever else you want. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I want the most when we talk about the uniforms. Lisa does not believe Ohio State will ever get the number 1 class because they're not in the SEC. And when you look at the class rankings in the SEC, boy, oh boy, we're talking, I think, maybe 8 of the top 10 are SEC classes this year, maybe 7 of the top 10. Oregon's got to pick it up, but they got a big boost here. Remember yesterday we were talking, I went through all the battles that Ohio State and Oregon had, and one of those battles was for Brandon Finney. And Brandon Finney was the backup plan for Dorian Brew, who Ohio State did not go heavy after. Brandon Finney just got his 5th star. So Dorian Brew gets his 5th star from 247. And obviously that doesn't mean anything to Ohio State. They had their own internal rating for him, but I was irritated at the time that they didn't go harder after him. And now he gets a 5th star. That would have been nice. Anyway, how can you possibly complain about DB recruiting so long as you land Naeem? Or even if you don't, to be honest, if you get somebody else to supplement that, like if I was to tell you at the beginning of the cycle, all right, you're going to get the number 1 corner who is by far the number 1 corner, in my opinion. I think Devin Sanchez could probably play college football this year at most places. So you're going to get the number 1 by far. And then you're going to get Fahim Delane at safety to go with him, and a couple of really promising prospects in Deshaun Stewart and Cody Haddad at safety, and one more corner somewhere. Like, you would have taken it. No, we don't do scum trolls here. They can kick rocks. They're out. They're out of here. I like our chat to talk about football and fun stuff, not like talk crap. Yeah, Bill, the traditional aspect. I just wanted to see, I had the green helmet and the Buckeye helmet out here. I just wanted to see that matchup, that uniform matchup, which is why even when Ohio State wore those alternate uniforms at times, I hated it for the Michigan game. Like, wear them some other time, wear them against anybody else. I want to see those two uniforms on the field. Like, I don't think there's anything more beautiful in college football than seeing Ohio State and Michigan's uniforms on the field when they take the shot and you see the guys lined up down the line across from each other. Like, that picture, and they take some every year. Like, I love it. I just love it. And I just wish the only thing we could change about it is to do a color on color matchup with the scarlet and the blue. I think that would be unbelievable. Jordan said Shiloh Sanders had the worst game I've ever seen from a safety since whoever. Looks, he's not good. He's not good at all. That one's not good. Is saying this jucking guy trolling? I don't think that's trolling. Do you believe the rumors coming out of the Woody about the defense making big changes? I do. I was told by someone I believe that there's been some serious conversation about it. So yes, I definitely do. I think that there is, I wouldn't necessarily call it big changes, but a change that we've been waiting and hoping for a while, which is the problem being addressed between Jim Knowles and Larry Johnson, which is Larry not really cooperating with what Jim Knowles wants to do. What are we talking about? Helmets? I can't put one of those helmets in here. My gosh. Could you imagine pulling the trigger on that kind of money for an Ohio State helmet? Oh my gosh. Just based on that alone, I couldn't do it. Ugh. Though, like I've said before, objectively speaking, I really loved the look of the winged helmet in general. And I don't mean just specifically to Michigan, but the winged helmet in general, which, as we know, is started at Princeton. I do think it's a really good look. Rod says, I can see this being Larry's last year, either retires or goes somewhere else. I was thinking the same thing, even though he is at Anthony. Did you go to Ellet, bro? Yes, he sure did. I'm an Akronite. Anthony. Anyway, guys, all right. That's our show today. Thank you so much for joining me. Tomorrow is a Juck and Chris Live, and we will be going over the slate of games, going over all the juicy stuff we want to talk about. We may try to get you guys a little more involved. Usually he and I are blabbering for the entire time, and then I kick him off. He's got to go get prepared. I don't kick him off for his show, but we will definitely discuss the games tomorrow and all the pertinent things that you guys would like to talk about. So thank you very much for joining me today here at Juck on Bucks, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Go East Dragons. Talk to y'all later. Juck on Bucks out.